We can start. We have some people in the room already, and I see people connecting. So I think we can officially start the event. So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us, for the ones here in the room, and for the people online. We have a great event for you today. A lot of nice things to see. You will hear about the World Settlement Footprint Tracker, which is an ESA-funded project implemented by the German Aerospace Center and Mind Earth. And it has been done also in collaboration with the World Bank Digital Tech for Cities. Let me first of all thanks the GFDRR team, in particular Erika. She's not here, but they were very helpful in setting up the event in a very short amount of time. And also thanks to our speakers that are connecting online, especially Abbas and Edward. I know it's already evening for you, so thanks for being with us today. So as I said, we have a great set of speakers today. Some of them are here in the room. You will have the opportunity to know everything about the World Settlement Footprint Tracker, but also most importantly, you will hear how you can join us in this initiative and contribute to the finalization of this data set and also tools. Also, I hope you will stay until the end, especially the one in the rooms. There's a little surprise at the end, so hopefully you can stay until the end. And just a gentle reminder to the people, to the speakers, to stay within your time slot so that we can have a good discussion at the end. My name is Fabio Chan. I'm the European Space Agency secondee to the World Bank. I'm based here at the headquarters, and I'm overseeing all the activities under the ESA World Bank partnership. So whenever there's anything to do with ESA or for observation, feel free to reach out. So let me give the floor to our first speaker for opening remarks, Abbas Jah, who is the practice manager for urban development and disaster risk management for the Eastern and Southern Africa region. I can also say, hopefully, Abbas, that you are a good friend of ESA after we visited us in Rome a few weeks ago. So over to you.
Thanks a lot, Fabio. So I'll be very brief. I want to begin by, first of all, thanking ESA. Like you said, it's a great partnership. And also the other partners around the WSF, including Mattia from Mind Earth. I see him on the screen. I want to make a few points to begin with, which is that I think the first thing is that our mission is very simple, that we want to put location at the core of all our lending and analytics so that countries can unlock private investment, raise local revenues, and manage risk. If you remember one line from this presentation, it is this, that geospatial is no longer a map service. It's not about pretty maps. It's about an operating system for development. And I think there are three shifts that are underway that make this real. So first is that global frequent 10-meter settlement changes from the WSF with credible 3D proxies means that we can finally see urban growth as it happens, not 2 years later. I think the second big development is that AI now lets us fuse satellite administrative records, street level signals into decisions that a city treasurer or a planner or a utility can act on. And third is that cloud delivery and open standards drops the cost exponentially across scale, across countries. So what does the WSF and AI show us? WSF shows that a clean and consistent signal of where the city is can be global, it can be frequent, and it's trustworthy in cloudy tropics. AI shows us that we can turn that signal into outcomes, parcels captured on the tax roll, encroachment flagged near reservoirs, service backlogs targeted on the fringe, and corridor value captured when density tips. Together, they shift us from pretty maps to measurable results. I do want to underscore the strategic role of ESA's partnership. I think ESA gives us three things that we cannot build alone. One is a dependable pipeline of science-grade products, WSF and Copernicus services that are methodologically transparent and stable over time. A co-development lab culture, teams like GDA, DLR, that will tune methods for African and Asian cities, not just for Europe. and the convening power with standard bodies and the private sector, so that our client ministries can get interoperable data, not just one-off pilots. So how does this fit into the World Bank's operating model? I think of it as a 3-layer stack. One is the signal layer. ESA feeds us WSF change, elevation, heat, flood, and land cover into bank-ready stack endpoints. The second is the decision layer. The bank with country agencies turns signals into products, parcel discovery, compliance targeting, right-of-way protection, climate risk screening. And then finally, the delivery layer. Operations lock these products into DLIs, regulations, budget systems, so that the gains persist even after a mission ends. I do want to give a shout out to Spark. So Spark is the Smart Parcel Atlas for Resilient Cities that was just awarded an innovation grant by the president of the World Bank last week. Spark is essentially a means of using AI and satellite imagery for rapidly identifying parcels within cities that can be used for things like densification, affordable housing, bringing bringing parcels into property roles. We are starting the pilot with 3 cities: Johannesburg, Kigali, and Juba. And we really consider ESA a core team member as we roll it out. We have to deliver something by next March. So what do we want? And what is our ask? We want to align with ESA on a joint city starter pack, WSF change, WSF 3D profiles, urban heat, flood susceptibility packaged as services with a 90-day adaptation guide. Our ask is help us guarantee the refresh, accuracy reporting, and country level onboarding. We will bring the policy hooks, the DLIs, the operational financing that will turn these services into a tax uplift, safer settlements, and bankable sites. So let me stop there and back to you, Fabio. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Abbas. That's okay. There's an echo somehow. Wrong mic. Thanks so much, Abbas. That are great points, and we are also very excited about the innovation grant and the new project. So hopefully that will be another good collaboration. I give the floor now to Christoph Albrecht, with actually a well-known face here at the bank. Many of you know Chris already. He was in my position a few years ago. He's now back at ESA in Rome as a program coordinator for the Global Development Assistance program. So we will hear a perspective from the ESA side. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Fabio. Hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Actually, I wanted to share my screen, but I got kicked out, so I'm not sure if this was possible. I'll try it once again. And you guys tell me if you can see something coming up.
Something is coming, but yeah, I think we can see them.
It's the website. You can see the website?
We can see.
You can see it. Okay, perfect. So, no, first of all, I mean, thanks for having me here. I see a lot of familiar faces, both in the room, but also on the list of the online participants. So it's very nice to have this event. And I mean, kudos to everybody involved in setting this up. So thanks, Abbas, for the kind words, and indeed also for visiting us a couple of weeks ago here at ESRIN for the GDA Knowledge event, which was, I think, quite a unique type of gathering. We had for the very first time all 3 elements, so to say, of the ecosystem together. So we had the development finance institutions, aside World Bank. We also had participation of IDB, ADB, EBRD, IFAD, etc. We had stakeholders from developing countries directly, but particularly from Africa and Asia. And we had the European Earth Ocean ecosystem represented through different companies that are involved in the GDA program. So it was really nice to see the exchange and the discussions, and we can have a lot of follow-on actions to that we can take. So I was asked to give a very brief context setting on the GDA program, considering that this is the current programmatic vehicle that boosts the ESA World Bank partnership and also is the funding mechanism, so to say, for the project, the WSF Tracker, that Mattia and team will discuss later. So rather than showing you some slides, I wanted to encourage you to actually check the GDA website, gda.esa.int. And you can see in the About section, it's very slow here, there's ESA through GDA through the years. I go directly here to the open page. So what you can do here is actually understand how the partnership with the bank developed. We started back in 2008 with the EO World initiative that some of you may still remember. It was really a series of small-scale demonstration activities to show what Earth observation can do. We then proceeded to set up the EO4SD initiative, which indeed coincided with my own term as ESA secondee at the bank, 2016. I stayed till 2020. And then the GDA program got launched in 2019, which was a considerable step change in the way we engage with IFIs, also in terms of funding allocated, etc. So on ESA side, we have about 45 million euros allocated to the GDA program, and we are now embarking on a completely new programmatic approach. We actually have all the ministers of our member states responsible for space gathering at the ESA Ministerial Council meeting in 2 weeks' time, and that will actually decide and define the next 3 years direction of where ESA and Earth observation will go. So very soon, in the next occasion, we will be able to talk about that in more detail. So maybe just to also highlight where we stand right now with GDA, we have achieved, I would say, a lot. We are engaging on more than 120 distinct IFI projects. So please check out the GDA impact dashboard that you can find also on the website, and you can filter there by World Bank, by IFI, and choose just the World Bank case studies, for example. You can filter by which type of Earth observation capability was used, which thematic domain is addressed, which region, etc. So all this is basically now a body of wealth of knowledge that we need to try to capitalize on and make best use of it to really foster the mainstreaming of Earth observation in World Bank operations. So the idea there would be to really move away from piloting, move away from considering this disruptive innovation to having it as something that's completely normal, that any TTL would not have fear anymore to engage on, and that any TTL would also be very familiar with in terms of what are the processes to actually push this forward in your projects. So actually, I'm particularly happy to be able to open this webinar linked to the WSF project, considering that actually I believe I was one of the very first users, and Mattia, you can back me here, before I joined ESA, when I still was at the World Bank and when this was not yet called WSF, but GUF, the global urban footprint, and so it's now, this is 13 years ago, and we are still working on it. So it's great to see the evolution, and hopefully we can together facilitate a stronger push and a real rollout of this in an operational manner in World Bank activities. And maybe just to highlight that this activity, while not one of the core GDA activities, it is actually something that evolved out of it. If we see here, this is the stakeholder map of all the European institutions that are involved in GDA. We have about 85 different companies and institutions involved. As the resilience activity, the fragility, conflict security, the transport infrastructure, and also the urban sustainability activities. So all 4 of these have already made use of the WSF in different case studies and use cases. So we eventually, took note and said, well, there is a very widespread demand for that. Across thematic domains and from different bank teams, and it is time to push for that in a more streamlined manner. And I think with that, I can really now also then hand back over to Fabio to introduce the rest of the today's webinar. And before doing so, I wanted to say thanks again to the World Bank and everybody involved for their enthusiasm and motivation in this partnership. I mean, we had before summer the ESA Living Planet Symposium with a pretty large World Bank delegation. We have the running joke that there were more World Bank people than NASA people at the ESA Living Planet Symposium. Obviously, that's due to different reasons, but it was impressive. And again, thanks for the good partnership, and I look forward to advancing together. Back to you, Fabio.
Thanks so much, Chris, for your perspective and also a good summary of the GDA program. So let's go to the core of this event. So finally, so we will hear about the World Settlement Footprint Tracker from Mattia Marconcini. I think I can say, Mattia, that you are the mind behind WSF. Mattia is a project manager and senior researcher at the German Aerospace Center, but at the same time is also co-founder and COO of Minder. And both entities have been are working to implement this activity. So without further ado, over to you, Mattia, for your presentation.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Fabio. I'm sharing my screen, hoping, and let's check if it works. Can you say something, because I won't see you? Can
yes,
you see it?
We can see it.
Okay. Yes. I also started the timing because I don't want to keep you busy for it's too long. But it's really a pleasure to be here and showcasing this. And let me thank you. Let me thank Fabio, Chris, Alex Tune, I don't know if he's connected, and also, and last but definitely not least, Edward Anderson, that have been supporting this throughout the timing. Indeed, it has been a long journey, and it's with immense pleasure that I would like to showcase this, and especially then we will see from Fabio's word, opening it up to you, let's say, in the next days. But without further ado, let's start. So we know that if you're here, you know that urbanization happens, right? And sometimes it goes really crazy. It's really fascinating yet challenging phenomenon that lately is really getting more and more critical for us at a planetary scale. And let's say to target urbanization, and you know what I've been doing, let's say in the last 10 plus years, I've been developing the World Settlement Footprint Suite, which has been generated in Google Earth Engine with the support of the Google team, but especially here, as we've seen, you know, before, this would have not been possible without the support of ESA and the World Bank. But what is the WSF Suite? It's a collection of open and free high-resolution global data sets, and that is, and I really stress that it is and will be always open and free, that aim at advancing our knowledge, our understanding of urbanization in general from different perspectives. And say, yeah, everything started at the time with the global urban footprint, but practically speaking, when we branded it as WSF, and the first global layer that was generated refers to the year 2015, so it's already 10-year old. And you can see it here. So it was the first global product of its type, outlining you know, the settlement extent at 10-meter resolution by combining optical data from Landsat together with radar data from Sentinel-1. And you know, after a few years, there was another satellite, Sentinel-2, coming into play from you know, Copernicus mission. And of course, it was a game changer because we could have concurrently 10-meter resolution radar and optical imagery available. And as you can see, you know, you might be aware, we generated the second layer in 2019, at WSF 2019, of course, where, you know, we improved in general, the quality of the layer, and also started also considering ancillary information like the presence of roads to be masked, etc. So this was already 6 years ago. And in between, we can see that the big boys came to the pitch, because we saw that, you know, Google and Microsoft started making available tremendously good data sets outlining building footprints at a large scale with remarkable accuracy. And the point is, but does it still make sense to target something, to produce something like the World Settlement Footprint? Well, let's have a look first. I know there are some limitations, right, of this layer. So we have Google Open Buildings, for instance, is available for south of the world, the global south, let's say, and it's not complete. And the same also holds for Microsoft. They might be completed, they might not, because this is something that we don't know. So there's not a systematic program, and we are not aware of the fact that they will update it in the future. And also, the other point is we don't know the vintage of this information. So we have fantastic building footprints, but we don't have any information on when were this buildings constructed. And let's say last but not least, we know that cities are growing, and they are growing tremendously fast. So of course, what we need is really timely information that might really support planning and decision making. So even if we cannot go at the level of building footprints, but 10-meter resolution would definitely play a role. So that's why I'm really happy to have the chance to present to you the World Settlement Footprint Tracker that basically I can consider one of my babies, and especially took a lot of my energies in the last 2.5 years. But I think that in front of us we now have a layer that is pretty unique, because as you can see from this animation, the WSF Tracker enables to outline the settlement extent globally at 10-meter resolution at a 6-month pace. So of course, previously we could produce one layer every X years. Now, really, we can come up with something that will be available systematically every 6 months. And here we have a very nice example of Juba, South Sudan, a city that has been lately remarkably growing. Let me also zoom a bit in this part of the city, just also to show the data that the layer 10-meter resolution enables to obtain. And let me also take the chance to make a quick tour of the world, and giving you some example of how the product looked like, in different areas of interest. So here, for instance, we have Nairobi, capital of Kenya, and again, we can see that we have kind of a mixture type of growth. Let's say in some parts it's more planned, so with patchy and bulk growth. We can even, for instance, appreciate that for certain construction, we can see how for complexes how long it took, let's say, to put them in place. In other areas, it's more spread. Of course, if we jump to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, we see a totally different pattern, right? So people are coming, settling at the fringes of the cities, and then slowly but steadily, this become part of the main body. And then another very interesting example here, we have New Cairo. So basically a new city that is being constructed in the desert eastern of Cairo. And again, we can appreciate through this color symbols how it's developing, and also how fast say this is occurring. Let's move then to Samarkand in Uzbekistan. I picked this as a remarkable example, as an exemplary for Central Asia, because it's a part of the world that is now currently experiencing a booming really in the growth of the cities, and this is occurring for several states in that part of the world. But yeah, of course, if we talk about settlement growth, we cannot talk also about China. Here I picked in this regard the example of Chongqing, that still it's probably one of the fastest growing and the biggest cities in the world. And again, this is pretty obvious by the picture. And let's say that we can see that the same pattern occurs, for instance, here in Chengdu and also Shanghai. But let's say if we jump, for instance, to South America, we see that also here we have a growth. It's not as remarkable as the one that we've just seen for China, But again, it's considerable. And again, we can see, for instance, here that it's pretty, there's a master plan behind, right? We have patchy construction, etc. So it's actually pretty typical for the continent. But in South America, what one can also experience is that major cities are growing, but not as fast as the secondary and tertiary cities. So I pick here a very nice eye-catching example for Pucallpa in Peru, and we can really see that urbanization is speeding up. So here we have definitely more yellowish tones corresponding to latest growth with respect, for instance, to let's say the earlier reddish tone associated with 18, 19, and 20. But also we can notice a different phenomenon at the same time. So here I picked, for instance, on the left, London in UK, and in the right, Bucharest in Romania. And you can see kind of the different speed of Western and Eastern Europe, because despite London is a big city, developing, of course, vertically, but the actual growth was limited in the past 8 years. On the right, we can see Bucharest again is pretty exploding, and this is this very similar what happens in Bulgaria, especially Albania, so all the eastern part of the old continent. And then come to an example that at the beginning I thought it was an error. So I say, okay, come on, something might have been wrong, because I targeted, I had a look to Venezuela, and I really check, okay, is it correct? But yes, because in the same pattern that I was classifying on the first time, we had part of Colombia and part of Venezuela. Colombia was growing, Venezuela not, and this is actually reflecting, the social and political situation that we have in the country, right? That is basically blocked, since the last 10 years in terms of, settlement growth. And then we can notice also a phenomenon that have a very socioeconomic background. Here I pick, for instance, Goma, where also the first time that I had a look to that, I say, okay, is it really correct? And because we see that, starting from, late 2024, there was this immense growth associated with the yellow color. And actually, then having a look to and researching this is actually correct, because it corresponds, to the areas where refugees that were located in the rest of the country has been, let's say, moved, to the outskirts of Goma, and that was also one of the reasons for the outbreak of the conflict that we had in the past months. Also, another nice example, at least from the settlement extent perspective, is the one of Aleppo. So we know Syria has been affected by a tremendous war from 2011 onwards. And here we can see on this left part the appearance of new settlements that are, if we have a look through it with Google Earth imagery where available, we can see that these are all refugee camps that are located here because they are pretty close to the boundary with Turkey. And speaking about Turkey, there was this other example for Antakya, which is, let's say, slightly more west with respect to the areas that were just in for Aleppo. And again, once I saw it the first time, I say that this might be wrong. I might have there must be something not correct. But then again, checking again where very high resolution imagery was accessible, it's actually correct, because you might remember that this region was affected by a tremendous earthquake in late 2023, and reconstruction is now taking place at an incredibly remarkable and fast pace. So all the yellow areas that you can see, there are new construction, new residential areas, for people that lost everything, during the event. And then an interesting phenomenon that we can see here relates to, for instance, areas that are recovering from previous conflict. We have Benghazi in Libya and Baghdad in Iraq. So again, you can see there's quite a lot of yellow, so meaning that, again, everything is restarting also on the growth perspective. Then, to conclude this tour, I picked also two very critical areas. So here we have the Gaza Strip, and again, we know that it has been they are devastated in terms of construction. So there have been a lot of demolitions due to the conflict. But this is not, of course, visible from the WSF tracker because buildings or the most part of the buildings or debris are still there. But if we have a look to actually the southern part of the strip, we can see that there is a lot of yellow. And again, luckily, there were also some recent images available on Google Earth. One can check, and these areas really correspond to where people migrated, from Gaza City to the southern part of the strip, and actually established, with 14 refugee camps, basically. And last but not least, also an interesting example of Mariupol, because it has been conquered by Russian forces. Of course, here in correspondence, of the steel factory. Again, this is still present in the data set, but the attention that I would actually will focus the attention on these yellow areas, because there is reconstruction is actually going, and this is not related to any military facility, especially one can appreciate from the typical pattern that this residential. So actually, Russians are transferring their people for living. And let's say this, as I said, concludes a bit, but I wanted also to now focus on different aspects. So for instance, how the tracker is generated. I don't want to go at all into the technical description, but to give you an idea, I mentioned before what I've been using as multi-temporal Sentinel-1 optical, Sentinel-1 radar and Sentinel-2 optical imagery, combined, for instance, with information about, surface models. So we have Copernicus, the WARDAM, and the ALOS 30-meter dam. And practically speaking, since it has been generated in the Google Earth Engine framework, we could not rely on deep learning, so we had to work a bit old school. So with a lot of effort related in the pre-processing and especially post-processing, because in terms of classification, we have a standard shallow classifier, specifically based on random forest, and we tried to exploit all the possible ancillary data that could have been used, ranging from road network, from OpenStreetMap, or for instance the database concurrently available from Facebook, the building footprints, of course, from Microsoft and Google and OSM that have been used in the training phase, but also other thematic maps that might be relevant for, let's say, reducing overestimation specific areas. What about also validations? Validation is really critical. I can tell you, I spent a sleepless night, also myself, and a pot of coffee and Google Earth, to check with historical imagery. Now, of course, what we want to do is exploit what I've been doing previously with the WSF 2019, but it's also a recent use that Google shared with me, as a trusted user, quite a number of very high resolution images that can be used exactly for this purpose. But to give you an idea of the quality, let's have a look here to a product for Dar es Salaam. This is an older version that was generated, let's say, up to July 2024, but it makes the job. So if we focus the attention on the rectangle there, we see that there is quite a lot of red and orange, and here we corresponding to a growth, up to late 2021. And here we can see an image from Google Earth from December 2018. And if we have a look in December 2021, exactly, it really corresponds to what we identified there. And another area here, again, this was an image from September 2019. And if we have a look in July 2020, there is the appearance of a structure that is reflected here in reddish tones. And then later on, May 2023 and July 2024, exactly appearing here in bright yellow, completely new construction. So I cannot guarantee that is exactly as accurate like this everywhere, but I mean, I really worked that if it's not like this, it's pretty close to that. And let's say, currently, I've already generated different mosaics of the layer, and we want to share it with you. And that's why there's a soft release that it's upcoming. Fabio will give you at the end of this talk all the major details, but to let you know why it's not yet there, because there is the last polishing that is ongoing, post-processing, that was on the one side, for instance, to make a consistent classification of the plastic greenhouses everywhere, so that, for instance, they are, let's say, systematically classified as built up all around the world. And a very critical issue is related to the illegal gold mines, and that mostly are associated with kind of overestimation of the settlement extent, despite if you are familiar with that, you have a lot of barracks that are built temporarily, big machinery that is detected from satellite. So here you can see, for instance, an example of Kumasi, where dedicated mask for including the areas where illegal gold mining is ongoing has been applied. And let's say, so we really expect that everything would be ready within the next 10 days. And then let me also give you an idea of the, let's say, upcoming layers that we have, because this is not the end, it's just the beginning, right? So what will be available besides the pure, settlement extent information is information related to the imperviousness. So to give you an idea, the imperviousness gives you, we can say, the built-up fraction, or let's say the amount of paved surfaces that are present in a 10 by 10 meter pixel that has been estimated to be constructed. So we have 3 cities, Dublin, Bangalore actually, and the Unicum of Kinshasa, Brazzaville, that have more or less the same extent, but if we see in terms of impervious surfaces, they have totally different patterns. So what I've been working let's say effectively and intensively actually in the last month was also to generate a consistent, temporally consistent imperviances over time, so that this will be also systematically available for the future. So you will not just have the information about, okay, when it has been constructed, but also how dense the construction. And let me also focus here again on the example of Juba. We can really see that we have a growth, but especially here in the center part of the image, we can appreciate that some pixels are getting let's say more and more red, which means that again they are getting let's say denser over time. So complementary, but definitely key information if we think about how important it could be in terms of when we think about flood risk or, for instance, the urban heat island phenomenon. Then let's jump to the next slide. I hope, okay, and yeah, we have an example, for instance, here of Mombasa in Kenya. So again, we can appreciate again the growth and the densification that we have, for instance, in the southern part of the city. And an example here in Asia, also of Medan. Again, the city have been steadily growing, and we can mostly appreciate that wherever all the new construction are mostly green. So at first, because it's actually growing with leapfrogging, with smaller settlement and densifying. And let's jump. Then also there are other products, part of the suite. You might have already encountered that. There was already a release of the Water Settlement Footprint 3D layer, estimating, let's say, the vertical displacement of the settlements at 90-meter resolution. There is a new version that has been, let's say, also finalized at 30-meter resolution that, for instance, also complements now even information from the Google Open Buildings dataset. Here we can see a very nice example for Tokyo, Japan, or for instance, Brasilia, with the typical, let's say, aircraft-shaped construction, and a lot of basically skyscrapers in this part of the city. And last but not least, of course, everyone that is interested in urbanization, of course, is interested in population density. And we know how challenging it is. So there is a Water Settlement Footprint population layer that has been generated and will be generated. I'll give you more details in a second. But just to give you also which are the ingredients. So the basic idea is to consider, for instance, the total population available per administrative unit. So from census, for instance, we know that in this area of Paris we have X number of inhabitants. To leverage information about non-residential areas, for instance, from OpenStreetMap, or even let's say, generated with doc processing. And then the idea is to consider the impervious as a proxy of the building density and the 3D, of the vertical displacement, in order that what we can do is in the areas that are marked residential, we associate more people where there is more volume, so where we have basically denser and higher structures. And for instance, here we can see, nice example for Paris, and we don't we don't appreciate any jump in correspondence, to the administrative boundaries that we've seen there, which is always a very good sign. And if you are familiar with the other existing products in terms of population that are mostly available at 100-meter resolution, this is also I would say a remarkable improvement. But the remarkable improvement will come when we will have also the population updated systematically every 6 months. Here, another example, for instance, for N'Djamena in Chad. Again, also showing that the products work as effectively in arid regions, and also in Abidjan, where you see also the pixel associated with the white color are corresponding to mostly in industrial areas. And then let's come also to one of the main novelties that is related to the World Settlement Footprint platform. So what is going on behind the curtain? So there is a project that has been financed by ESA as a CCN to this artificial intelligence for smart cities activity that is going on since several years, where the objective is to guarantee the, let's say, update of the WSF Tracker and particularly also the population up to July 2026. But the idea is really to develop the platform that is an interactive, let's say, exhibits a WebGIS interface, which is, built following the state-of-the-art protocols, and enables to download and to explore the layer. And then, the very key here is the presence of a dashboard with the different pre-computed statistics at, let's say, multiple levels related to different indicators, and we'll jump into this also in a second. But of course, another important aspect is due to the fact that we don't want also people to be locked in our platform, right? But for instance, if the Kenya Space Agency or if the government of Tanzania would like to include these layers into their platform, this will be possible because all the rasters and the vector layers that are produced will be shared for seamless integration through APIs. So again, I think that with respect to standard platforms that might be similar in this realm, this is already a very relevant improvement. Coming to the aggregation levels, what we are aiming at producing are aggregation at the country scale, so admin 0, and then at the regional level, administrative level 1. And also what we want to do here is to provide aggregation levels at cells that are compatible with the, let's say, processing, where the user can, select one or multiple of them and have the statistic, for a specific region of interest. Here we are evaluating different possibilities because, for instance, you might be familiar with the H3 cells. Here you can see an example of level 6 that might be possible, with a radius of the hexagon about 3.5 kilometers. But for instance, here the drawback is the fact that each hexagon has a different area. While, for instance, if we consider this ISEA3H, very complicated one, which is a variant of this, that, at the level 13, instead we have, cells that share the same area. So we are still in the evaluation process here. Of course, then you will hear it from Fabio, but we'll also have the chance to collect feedback in this regard from your side. And let's say also, last but not least, of course, we would like to pre-compute the statistics for the urban centers. And if we have a look around, the urban centers are very complicated. There are different databases here available, and these are actually not much up to date. That's why here we've been developing a WSF-based criterion, and here you can see the result, for instance, of how it looked like for Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And again, this will be computed, for instance, for the city where we expect to have more than 50,000 inhabitants worldwide. And then let's say, to the indicators that we are aiming at, let's say, considering. For instance, we want to target flood. So in this regard, it has already been shared with us the FATOM version 3 flood depth layer 30-meter resolution. And here the idea is for instance, to consider a term period of 100 years, and the current scenario, but also the RCP 8.5 2050 scenario. So again, it's a apocalyptic scenario with different flood types. So considering the pluvial, the fluvial undefended, and the coastal, but even the combination of this. And the idea here was to define a different hazard level, depending on the specific flood depth. And the type of indicators that we're aiming at computing is, for instance, for each term period, scenario, flood type, and hazard level, have an indication of the total settlement extent over time, the relative growth, and the same for the population. And let me give you a quick example here. We computed already the statistic. We are preparing this analysis for Germany together with Jun Rentschler, a colleague at the World Bank. I don't know, Jun, if you're connected, but happy if you're present there. And again, this was done up to January 2025, so we can appreciate, the percent growth of the settlement extent in Germany with respect to, the different flood types. And if we consider, for instance, the combined flood, also we can have a map that showcases, the percentage of exposed settlement, at a very detailed level for the entire country. And then I don't want to go too much into detail, but at this stage, but what we are aiming at considering is also, let's say, information about the extreme heat. And here, we are considering a different hazard level, slight, moderate, or severe. Information related to, seismic exposure. And in this regard, also there is a standard data set that is the global seismic hazard map that we want to exploit. In terms of cyclones, for instance, there is a tropical cyclone maximum wind speed with different return periods, and again, the different hazard levels that correspond, to the severity of the phenomenon that we are considering. And last but not least, also information about land subsidence. So for instance, here we want to leverage the 2040 subsidence susceptibility map with different probability intervals. Again, it's really in a nutshell, but is to really to show that we are thinking about, providing, the user with effective information that might be relevant. And now we come also to, let's say, an example of how the platform is being developed. So here I'm pleased, to unveil a bit, the first, let's say, extended mock-up. So you will have the possibility of browsing the layer, then to select, for instance, if you want to consider the tracker or the population, and then the different hazard types that we just considered. On the left side, you will be plotted systematically, with the, for instance, the built-up area in terms of the hectares for the the area that where you're zooming in, and also at the for instance the at-risk population in flood zones, or in extreme heat zones, and then you can again select the specific admin 0, admin 1, and if we go, for instance, in terms of the different grid cells, you can zoom and then, for instance, start selecting multiple cells. And then, if you open, the right panel, you will be prompted, different graphics that are showcasing, similar to the ones that I just displayed for, the flood specific risk. Again, in terms of population, in terms of settlement extent per se, and there might be bar chart, there might be pie chart. You can even compare different areas. So we're really working extensively in order to make this as smooth and, let's say, as intuitive as possible, with tremendous capabilities and the possibility, for instance, of generating and exporting graphics in PNG or also PDF. And really, to close up, I know that we are already at the end of the half an hour, but if you allow me a couple of minutes more, I would like to show you also and trigger a bit of what can be done with this type of product and what has already been done, for instance. So one of the first GDA project that was mentioned also by Chris in his presentation is the one related to fragility. And in that regard, an early version of the WSF Tracker was used, for instance, to assess, the growth following the specific road construction. So we had different areas, for instance, in Nigeria, where there had been a construction of paved roads, and actually we could see if the fact that a road was constructed was a driver, to a multiplier, for the settlement extent and also population. So bringing more people and serving more people. And this was actually the case. And then let me also give you an overview of what you're seeing here. So at Mindert, we have been developing, let's say, a new super resolution nighttime light product that enables to enhance what is normally accessible from the NASA VIRS product at half a kilometer to stunning 130 meter resolution. So the product, this has been also an effort of a dedicated ESA project. So thanks again to ESA for supporting us here. But you can see, for instance, the tremendous and remarkable effect in, for instance, for Barcelona here or for Shanghai. And you can imagine you have detailed information about nighttime lights, and you have the tracker available. You can put the two things together, right? So for instance, here you can see at the 6 month time step the combination of the tracker at the super resoluted nighttime lights for Yangon, the biggest city in Myanmar, which is severely affected by power outages, right? And we know it especially after 2021, after there was the military coup. And unfortunately, it's a very severe phenomenon there. So one can appreciate that there are areas that are growing, but they are mostly growing, for instance, in places where there is no light. And also where there is light apart, the southern part of the city, we really see a pattern, that is varying remarkably. And we can do the same analysis, for instance, in terms of land surface temperature, right? So again, here I didn't have the chance to make the temporal extent example, but I mean, just to give an idea, what we've been done was to take the maximum temperature from Landsat 8 and 9, which is collected at 10:30 local time AM, so it cannot be considered as an urban heat island proxy. But again, by superimposing here, the WSF Tracker mask, we can appreciate that there are areas, most likely industrial, that are associated with higher temperatures. And if we repeat, for instance, the exercise in a developing country like Nigeria, and here we have Abuja, we can notice that, of course, we have also an interesting phenomenon, because here the areas that are appearing in, let's say, dark red and actually really corresponding to informal areas. Why? Because, in the specific case, they are associated with barracks, with metal roofs, and even if this represents the max temperature, at 10:30 AM, they come out that they are identifiable pretty easily. And last but not least, a very final example, this also was an example related to a project that was funded by ESA a few years ago, called AO for Poverty, where the idea is really to leverage AI intelligence to estimate the wealth from space. And here, there was, as a reference, the Living Standard Measurement Study in situ surveys, or the same from the DHS, that provides point reference information where questionnaires were undertaken. And by leveraging Sentinel-2 based feature, and also the nighttime light radiance and the WSF imperviousness, we could come up with a map of estimated wealth at 100 meter resolution. So again, here you can see the product for entire Nigeria. And again, here at the top, we see our training, and this was the result. And you can imagine now, for instance, try to extend this throughout time, if not at 6 month pace, even at 1 year pace. And yeah, so this is it from our side. I hope that you're still there, because I could not see any of your faces. I close and come back to you, Bob. Thanks a lot for your attention. And let me close here.
Thanks a lot, Mattia. That was great. I can confirm you that nobody left.
That's good. Okay.
Not from the room, but also online. So, actually, I think it was very, very, very interesting. And let me share my slides again. So before giving other information about the soft release and the data and so on, I want to give the floor to our discussants for today. So we selected the best collaborator that we have in the bank, of course, and different sectors of the bank. And now, what are the ideas on the table? Now we could use this data set, but also this could spark new ideas for future collaborations, considering that we are entering a new phase of the program, and therefore also of the partnership between ESA and the bank. So let me give the floor to Na Nguyen, Global Leader of the Poverty Department. Then we will hear also from Mino Kitse from Transport, Stella Chirangat Mutai from the Energy team. We have Benjamin Stewart from the GHOST team, and then Edward Anderson from GFDRR, who has been involved also in the design of this initiative. So each one of them will give us a reflection from their perspective on how we could use this data set. So let me stop here and over to you now.
Thank you, Fabio. And thank you so much for the presentation. It's super useful. So I have 3 comments on the usage. One, and then the 4th one is the questions. And one more, the 5th one is on the follow-up. So on the usage, my first 3 comments, I mean, this is fantastic, right? I could see 3 usage out of the WSF data set. The first one is economic agglomeration. So for us, it is very important to figure out where the jobs are. So I think the WSF can give us a very good idea about that. Now, and then, of course, the next question for us is what job and for who? And with that, we can overlay with the traditional data set that we usually have, which is economic census or household survey. So that's on the first comments, where the jobs are. The second usage, as you already mentioned, Mattia, is you have a very precise urban identification, right? Way beyond the administrative boundaries. And for us, it is super important because it has implication to where the poor are. Because we know in the literature and based on our experience, it is the poor who concentrate and pocket of the poor in the peri-urban. And with this precise estimate, it has implication to the geographic targeting that we are doing, as well as implication to the federal and local government budget allocation. The third usage that I can see is forced displacement, because with the WSF, my understanding is that you can see very precisely the scale and the location of displacement. Either it's IDP, internal displaced persons, or refugees, and thus can mobilize much better humanitarian resources as well as staffing, right? So that's my comment on the 3 usage. Now my question is, my 4th one is a question for you. I may have missed it. Is we look at a lot of building up over time, but how about the reverse? Can you report building that has been damaged or abandoned over time? The reason why I'm asking it is because it has an implication to our assessment of disasters and conflict. And I saw at the end you have the thematic indicators on flood, but my understanding is more on estimating the at-risk population more than estimating the damage after the disaster or conflict happens. And lastly is wealth from space. That one is fantastic, coming from poverty practice, right? So I see that you use DHS. So my pledge to you is that, I don't know if my team connected online. I see Henry here. We also have Ben. We have the geo-coded global household surveys, which is, proudly to say, way better than DHS. And I think we could collaborate a bit more to have more precise wealth from space. I'm so sorry I have to leave early, but I will watch the records to get more. And Fabio, I'm so sorry for missing your surprise. But you know, you never cease to amaze us with all the surprise. So I'm looking forward to more surprises.
Of course. Thanks so much, Na. And yeah, of course, feel free to read. I know you have another commitment now. I don't know, Mattia, if you have a quick reaction to the points before we let Na to go.
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks a lot for all the comments, especially I think that the closest to a question is related if we can identify damaged buildings. That's something that might come up in the future, in the sense that so far the assumption was always building growth, right? So this is when you have a look to the you know, if it was at least for a certain period of time consistently built in the past, it's still marked as built. But you have now, I mean, now it's available. It will be also open at, let's say, relatively soon, the imperviousness. So if for the time being, if we cannot see, for instance, that is demolished, we can, for instance, see that there's something odd there, because you know, if the imperviousness decreases, then it's mostly related to, you know, abandonment, right, or the demolishing. So of course it's complicated. I mean, this is something that can be done ad hoc, because for instance, leveraging specifically Sentinel-1 data, it's possible. There has been also lately some very interesting analysis already, even in the Earth Engine for Ukraine, that are particularly relevant. So I take a note here, of course, because it's something super important. But yeah, it's so I guess that the only means to see it for the time being is, let's say, related to the impervious. And about what you mentioned, to have potentially even more detailed information than you know, DHS on LSMS. I mean, it's music to my ears, so happy to follow up the discussion here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mattia. Now let's hear from Nina from the transport department.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. No, this is a really fantastic database and really amazing. So I will just focus on four main points and the potential work and collaboration on that. So the first one would be about accessibility and urban transport planning. So we are usually really interested into understanding, as it was also mentioned, like where the jobs are, access to jobs, access to services, and how the urban transport, or in general transport infrastructure, serves those areas. So it's really great to see what are the areas that are growing around the city, so that what are the potential areas that could be underserved by public transport, that could be prioritized for public transport expansion. So to understand what are the peri-urban or informal areas that are emerging and which are transport poor, let's say, so that this can be linked to future transport infrastructure projects. The second one is about the corridors and connectivity planning. So this is to understand what are the settlement patterns around the transport corridor. So this could be the corridors also, like such as the roads, the railways, or BRTs, bus rapid transit networks, or mass transit routes, and what would be the emerging growth poles around these areas, and mobility hotspots, which can be done. So this can be also useful for the feasibility studies for each of the transport infrastructure, urban transport infrastructure projects, and for project screening to identify what would be the potentially the important areas to focus on. Of course, the third one would be very important one about resilience and climate risk. So this is to inform teams about resilient infrastructure design, the maintenance, and the planning. So this again shows us the importance across the space where this type of project should be focused on. And finally, and something that is really dear to my heart, is the monitoring and the evaluation. So how would this would help us track the spatial impacts of transport investments over time. So where are the transport investments put on over the years, and how do they impact the development of these areas and the expansion and the density in the in the urban space. So for the next, I think this is a really amazing data set, really amazing platform. I think this could be already integrated with some of the tools and models that the transport infrastructure group has it already. So such as some the specific tools for urban transport measuring, accessibility to jobs, access to services. So I think this is already really, really great, and this is something we would be happy to work on. And of course, the data that was mentioned by Guy about the wells. So that's impressive. That's really amazing, because we are trying to look at not only on the locations of the jobs, but also the type of settlement, right? And the type of the income groups that are serving this transport. So I think that's another really, really great and great data set that could be used by us. But no, thanks so much. This is incredible. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Those are really great points, and we definitely will keep that in mind. Let's move now to Stella from the Energy Department. You can share a few thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. This is a good presentation. I think from the energy perspective, I'll just share 3 dimensions and then probably a future collaboration opportunity. I think from the energy perspective, settlement is key in estimating energy demand and energy access. So I think because it allows us to see where we can use new settlements emerge, especially moving from rural to peri-urban settlements that occur every year. So this could be a place where we could maybe use for energy demand estimation. Secondly, we could also use the settlement to determine the electrification status. So we can either know whether they're connected or not connected. And because it also captures the infrastructure bid, and that could also come into where to determine where the best optimal sites for grid infrastructure and where they are, because most of them are connected to road infrastructure as well. Thirdly, we could also use it for climate risk resilience, because I saw a part of the flooding as well. Most of the energy utilities are affected by climate risk assessment, and also we could see which settlements are affected by the climate hazard as well. So that could be also well. And I also saw the DRC, because I know they are always affected by conflict as well. And so this could be optimal, especially in locations where we want to identify that are the new camps located or have access to electricity because of the movement as well. And then lastly, maybe in the future opportunity that I would see was embedding it in energy modeling and costing, and to identify which new settlements need electricity, especially in the rural areas where a lot of settlements is not easy to be mapped out. So this could also be a good opportunity. And also tying it to the survey part as well. We also use MTF survey as well in energy demand, and to identify the tire levels on energy demand and estimation for different type of settlements. So this could also feed very well into it. Maybe my last question that I would share with you, maybe you can look at it, predictive analytics. So how can settlements be used to determine where can the future electricity demand focus on? So which settlements are likely to come in the next future 5 years, and where should we focus on? So thank you.
Thanks so much, Stella. Those are also quite a good list of very good points. So Mattia, I see that you want to react to this quickly.
Yes, no, thanks a lot. I mean, there are tremendous, very interesting comments, but especially to the last one, because that you anticipated already what could be next. Because we are already working with another ESA project related to this. So Mandert is really developing a project called City Next that leverages the tracker and the imperviousness to estimate the future growth of the settlements. So here we are really going into leveraging the latest state of the art in terms of AI, because we have all the information from satellite in the past 8 years. So we really want to train a model that gives you also with a high likelihood where there will be the growth, at least in the next 5, 6, 10 years. So the project has started a few months ago. It's ongoing, but I mean, it's something that it's extremely promising. So of course, this is something that cannot be done at the global level, or at least for the time being. But again, it goes in that direction because again, it takes into account where you might have more demand in the future, and also connecting to the comments that were given before in terms of transport. This is also really related because, for instance, one would have even the possibility of having what if scenario based. If we build this road, how the cities will develop, because we know well that in cases, especially in developing countries, if you build the road first, then this will be a proxy for having or for facilitating the settlement development there. So again, thanks a lot once again, and I hope that we might even have the chance to discuss about this additional project in the very next future.
Thanks, Mattia. Let's move to the next speaker, Ben from Ghost team, please.
Thanks a lot. This is a great product, one I'm fairly familiar with, right? Having worked with the WSF Evolution for years, back when it was active. I think the temporal aspect is one that I see as kind of the most important. I'm less interested in the spatial resolution, just because that's kind of more work for me. You're making the data 100 times as large as it was before, so that's just a problem. That's not a benefit. But the time aspect is really interesting. We're working on a project with the JDC and the UNHCR about improved geospatial data for designing surveys in situations of forced displacement, right? And previously, our built area data was limited to either 1 year intervals for the WS Evolution, a decade ago, or like global human sentiment layer, which is a 5-year evolution, right? So forced displacement happens faster than that. So 6 months, that's pretty fast. But I don't think you can get a survey designed and implemented faster than 6 months. So the 6-month interval will allow us to do things like, where do we, here's our sampling frame for a city that was established in the last household survey. Okay, but where did all those refugees go? Like, where did you see? Well, the city expanded hugely in the north. You showed some great examples of that. Well, we probably need to redesign our sampling frame to take into account those places. And we haven't had good geospatial data to do that before, except for, manual inspection of high resolution imagery, which is complicated. Similarly, you mentioned the buildings. I'll call them the overture buildings, because OSM, Microsoft, Google all sort of slams together into one data set. People love that data set, but having provided geospatial support at the bank for over a decade, everybody always asks for, okay, but how did it change? How's it changed since the last time? Well, none of our building data sets have any time aspect, right? They're all just data sets. And even like it's a data set of a snapshot of like a 8-year window somewhere. We can attribute those buildings with dates now, going back to 2016 and really going back to 85 if we use the old WSF Evolution Tracker, right? We can really see when these buildings came into existence. I have a bunch of technical questions, Mattia. Fabio, I would suggest we maybe have another session that can be focused more on the technical aspects, because like I really want to know how this works, because people are going to ask me how it works, and right now I don't have answers for some of the technical ones. But I do want to ask a question about urbanization, right? Because this is not a map of urban areas, right? There's a map of settlements. Urban is a land use case. Built area is a land cover question. So the bank has an urbanization method. It's based on population density, developed the GHS SMOD methodology. Now, I have gotten into it's originally designed for a 1 kilometer population data set. It's based on population density thresholds and then total population of the settlements once you apply those thresholds. Now, I've gotten into arguments with the GHS SMOD people before about going from 1 kilometer to 100 meter, because you lose like a certain amount of connectivity. 100 meters is a tenth of the distance of 1 kilometer. Now, the results I show them indicate that, yeah, it does make a huge difference. It looks better, but you don't actually lose a lot of area. Going down to 10 meter, you're really running into a resolution problem when it comes to the population data, right? Like it's, I saw your map of, I think it was in Paris. The highest value is 6 people per pixel. Setting thresholds of what determines what's urban or not when you're looking at, fractions of a person per pixel is going to be complicated. So I wonder, have you thought about applying, say, that urbanization method to this data, to your population data sets? And then also I want to ask about the temporal resolution of the population data, right? Because your administrative data is not updating every 6 months. So how do you, what's the source of your administrative data? And then how do you emphatically caveat the nature of this, because this is true of all grid population data, right? Like World Pop is now released its global product at 1 year intervals. They don't have population data at 1 year intervals, right? They're taking an old census, applying a linear UN correction, and then disaggregating from there. Is that what your approach is as well, and where are you sourcing that admin data?
No, because it's exactly really touching a very good point, because that's why the population layer is not yet there. Because there's a lot to do in this regard, exactly. So 2 things. Normally, when you have a look to GHS POP or World POP, one of the major problems is also related to boundaries, because they take very simplified boundaries, and sometimes I wonder how they can release a product like this, but okay, that's another story. But yes, exactly. So so far, we had the chance to work also supporting different World Bank projects through GDA. where we used the population, and it was a nice test bed for me, right? Because it really depends if you take the census, right? It could be old, but it could be not even fully representative. Because if you take the census from Rwanda, right, you redistribute the population, and then you see that how is it possible that Kigali has a lower density than other cities? And then you talk to the locals, and you understand that on purpose, the informal settlements have not been counted, right? They don't count in the census. Fine, okay, but then you have them there. So of course, in this regard, it's really also it's to discuss, to understand if it's worth redistributing in these cases at admin 0 or at admin 1, right? Taking the information there. The other point, what I've been doing mostly was for specific countries to check the latest census and then to use, OSM boundaries. Now there's the new data set from the World Bank that I guess can be also used. But then it was, doing the matching from a PDF report that you have, these units and then the other units that are in OSM with different characters. So luckily now we have ChatGPT, but previously it was done. And then, but you have it, for instance, for 2022, and now we have it. We are in 2025. So what I'm doing there is not purely relying on this linear model, but trying to exploit wherever available, or doing some, let's say, modeling myself, the growth and the death rates, because those are changing, let's say, relatively slowly, right? So if we have information of this, then we can try to apply that, and also taking into account, multiplication factor related to, if you're a bigger city, you might be attracting more people than, a secondary city as well, or in general, an admin region like this. So just to let you know that not later than two days ago, I made the exercise for Syria, because my wife needed that for a project. Say, shall we try, say, we throw a coin, or really, because that was probably the extreme. So in that case, I was even considering the rate of people that we know from UN are returning since the ceasefire from December last year. So again, that's complicated. That's why, we're trying to make it more automatic as possible, but that's why this needs a bit more time. So if you want a good product, you need a lot of insight.
Excellent. Great, thanks.
Happy to follow up on more on this if you
want.
I'm
going to send you an email. I'm going to send you an email also about the H3 cells. I have a project on that as well that I have an opinion on which one I'd like you to use, because it would help me personally. But yeah, I do want to follow up on some of the technical details, because it's definitely something that I've got a lot of questions, but it's a great product. So I'd like to really interrogate it.
Yeah, and thanks, Mattia. Yeah, we can definitely have a follow-up session on more technical things. Before opening the floor, I see that there's a hand raised. But still, I wanted to give the floor to Edward to hear from him, his perspective from the DRM side, but also kind of wrapping up the discussion, considering that he has been involved in this project since the very beginning. Please, Edward.
Thank you, Fabio, and thanks, Mattia. I'll be quick and then sort of simple. Two use cases that I think I know the answer to, but I'll ask anyway. First of all, in updating exposures, property registration, taxation is sort of the heart of municipal outsourced finance. So what I see being an extremely valuable application is if we can create an up-to-date, a very timely picture of where properties are, can we then connect to the WSF to identify the time period of first detection? What is that today? And how long to the nearest 6 months have these buildings and or plots existed? When was a plot first cleared, for example? When did a building first appear? So that to me is like relatively simple, I hope, but I think extremely useful to have very timely asset inventory and that dynamic, that temporal history of when things happened. What I think sounds quite exciting is if you could then apply to that the sort of wealth from space model to try and at least estimate how quickly neighborhoods have been appreciating, let's say, or poor neighborhoods, richer neighborhoods, and use that as a kind of shadow land zoning or to guide property registration, taxation applications. So that's kind of one domain. The other one that's more sort of dear to my DRM heart is we often preach about prevention, and I think people underestimate the opportunity cost of old or patchy data. So I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. I think, oftentimes we apply a risk model to data provided by the client where they think it's 2 years old because it was processed in 2 years ago, but then you have to look into the details to find out that based off imagery that was 4 years old and not complete. And what we end up doing is identifying the, let's say, the risks in the city, the exposure of 4 years ago, and that's very costly to come and fix if it takes you a year to design a project. So you're basically coming along 5 years late, and it's all corrective risk management, right? Resettling communities, building storm channels and drains in areas that have already been built up or been deforested, trying to reforest urban wetlands and retention basins in areas that have now been given commercial value for other purposes. So the more we can forecast the future urbanization, the more we can justify prevention components that have a much better return on investment. The challenge with AI is if you forecast that a neighborhood's going to grow and then you enforce territorial development controls and nobody moves there and you create a nature reserve, let's say a retention basin for flood risk management, you can't really prove how much, how effective that was. But do you see a way to utilize the impervious surfaces to measure physical indicators of future demand? For example, cleared plots where people build foundation slabs. No one's built a house there yet, but very clearly they're planning to move there in a few years. Can we begin to kind of do a heat mapping of building foundations with a view of making it much cheaper to do sort of preventative interventions, or put in capital, infrastructure and services at lower costs, and begin to, in a sense, put a return on investment number on the timeliness date of the data or the predictive capability? I think that'd be super interesting. So those are 2 use cases. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Edward. Allow me 1 minute to give you some additional information before I give the floor to anybody that wants to ask questions. As we mentioned, you will have the opportunity to access the dataset. There's a simple online form that you have to fill in. We just want to understand, of course, who you are and your email address, so we can send you the information. But also what is the context in which you're thinking to use and test the data, and then also what's the application that you're thinking of. So you have time, about 10 days. We will select 25 users, and we will give you access from November 24. As Mattia mentioned before, is still exporting the final things. So we will be ready for sure from November 24. And then what we are asking you in return is to give us some feedback on the data itself, the accuracy, precision, but also the indicators, if something is missing, if you have other ideas that are not being included. So you have the opportunity really to contribute to the initiative, and whenever it's possible to include under this current phase, we will be happy to do so. We can promise to add everything that you might suggest, but what is possible, of course, will be done. Very shortly, I just want to mention a few new initiatives that we have started under the ESA World Bank Partnership. A newsletter has been issued yesterday. If you haven't received it, write to me. I will be happy to add you in the distribution list. There's a new internet page for the partnership. You will find all the information regarding the activities and available opportunities. We will have a next event next week, Tuesday, November 18th at 9 a.m. DC time. It will be an info session on the partnership. And so you will hear about the history of the partnership, how we work, what are the opportunities, and what is about to come with the next phase. And also we are planning to have new events from January, still to define the exact date, but there will be the full release of the WSF Tracker. So you will hear about that. But also we are discussing with Water and Transport to have an event summarizing all the activities that were conducted under the GDA components of Water and Transport, so that we can share what has been done and discuss on the next steps. I'm stopping here. I know there was a hand raised from Satya. So Satya, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted it's very good to learn about this partnership and this community that uses WSF. I thought I was one of the few who used in the bank the world settlement footprint. The application did not begin with the world settlement footprint. It was about using machine learning algorithms to identify and classify logistics facilities. I work in the global trade unit, so we work with logistics facilities. Ultimately, we developed an algorithm, attribute-based classification, to identify warehouses. And then we used that to develop metrics around logistics sprawl, as it is called, the tendency of logistics facilities to move to the peri-urban areas and outskirts. And that has got implications to greenhouse gas emissions, because more ton kilometers will travel if there's larger sprawl. Long story short, we were able to use the world settlement footprint to determine how the evolution has taken place in terms of the distribution of logistics facilities. And again, my colleague, who's a co-TTL for that program, is also working on corridor development and corridor growth, and how employment has grown around corridors, transport corridors where the World Bank has invested. So I was wondering, of course, we learned this because we engaged some German academics, and they were working in DLR. So we were able to, get hold of that information, and we learned about WSF from there. But it's good to see that this partnership is there and this access is there. And I'd also like to connect with people who are working in this area and have made use of WSF to develop economic parameters like employment, growth in industries, and so forth along industrial corridors. Stop here.
Thanks, Satya. Thanks for the comment. I can't see if there's any other people online that want to ask questions. Otherwise, I see that in the room there's somebody, Mercedes.
Thank you so much. Fabio, for this session. And Matthew, good to see you again and see the updates on the board. So I want to echo Ben. It would be wonderful to have a follow-up conversation. Also, so most of us are on H3 grades, and to see what's the grade that you are going down for. I'm also particularly interested in indicators that you presented today. My question is, do you see that the indicator, for example, exposure indicators for population, as well as land exposure to hazards that you have already, would that be also publicly available and accessible through APIs that you can hit on? And also, on population, I've had this conversation with some people in the room already. Do you think that, given that you're now combining these different layers, you have the settlements, and that you can give us a error bar for your confidence in the population, in the grids that you're presenting? I think that would be extremely helpful in service delivery planning.
Oh, well.
Yeah, that's it.
Please, Mattia.
No, sorry. Yeah, I think I got a glitch in the connection the last second, but I think I got the question. No, so for the original layer, of course, will not be shared. We just share unless they are the only commercial data set that is used will be the one from Fathom. The other are all open. But yeah, the statistics will be all accessible at the different aggregation layers. So one can download them, not just interact with the dashboard. So everything will be exposed. So we have to check if you need to also, in that case, you need to simply query them per API, but they are there to be used, right? So I hope that I got the first part of the question correctly. For the second part, the error bars, that's something which, maybe we can discuss further, because happy to provide anything that might help in also giving a better insight on how good the product would be. But in terms of population, you would need a reference that somehow could be correct, right? So that what we can do, normally what is done in terms of in terms of population validation. You disaggregate, for instance, at a higher level, and you compare with the numbers that you have at a finer degree of, for instance, you disaggregate at admin 1 and you compare against admin 2. If available, this is doable. It's a bit harder to plan to do it for at the global scale, because the availability of the data varies really remarkably from country to country. But if you have any idea or any specific requirement in this regard, happy to really follow up, because I understand the issue, and putting a label on the quality is key to me as well. But in this regard, it's not as easy as giving the confidence on a simple land cover.
No, I get that, but maybe the only reason I brought it up is because you have the temporal information, and you already that would be like a summary way to know that, for example, the latest, I don't know, South Africa census that has been used, it's like from 2000 versus for Germany, you're using 2024. Let's say even that level of that would be extremely helpful.
Sure.
And then save a lot of time from us digging down that, okay, what was the data sources and what was the latest, and now their building footprints is from this. So nothing perfect, but I know that there is no ground truth for it. But we do all of those soft validations manually between different sources, and that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, so I think definitely we can organize another smaller session just focusing on very technical things. I think that would be very useful. So we will follow up on that. We run out of time, so for the people in the room, I have the surprise. I have a few ESA gadgets, so don't leave. I want to thank all the speakers. I don't see a bus online. I think it's quite late in Nairobi. So just want to thank everyone for participating and sharing your thoughts. I don't know if there's any other last comment from you, Mattia or Edward. Otherwise, I think we can wrap this up.
No, thanks a lot once again, Fabio, for organizing this, and also for the extremely valuable comments. I'm looking forward now to the comments when you really start playing with the data. So I really hope that, again, we can serve it even better in the future. And looking forward to what's next. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mattia. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Ciao.
Thanks. Bye-bye.